Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the hrQ's Ideal Roundtable webinar. I'm your host, Sal Vergara, Vice President, Strategic Partnerships here at hrQ and our parent company, Landrum HR. As always, special thanks to our marketing department for orchestrating today's session. You just saw the span of what we deliver to our client partners every day, so please let us know if we can be an extension of your HR team to support all of your human capital initiatives. The genesis of these sessions happened 2 years ago when I created these roundtables to provide a platform to promote the dialogue around inclusion, diversity, equity, and authentic leadership. Today, according to the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, about 30% of the LGBTQ+ community are exhausted from concealing their authentic selves, and 46% are still closeted at their workplace. Despite progress in becoming a vibrant part of our daily lives and culture, most in the LGBTQ+ community still fear reprisals and being ostracized from colleagues. The byproduct of ignoring all this could result in increased turnover, challenges in your talent pipelining and attraction, and most importantly, is impacting and stifling your employees to feel welcome and comfortable to be their true authentic selves. This all affects their mental well-being and their sense of safety. And what we should all aspire to is creating a sense of understanding and promoting dialogue to help people realize not only the challenges and fears of the LGBTQ+ community, but ultimately how they want to be treated and respected to live a happy life as everyone deserves. Today, you'll learn how to be an LGBTQ+ ally, advocate, and champion of equality in our communities. You'll learn how to dispel the misperceptions and stereotypes and cultivate a sense of inclusivity at work so that everyone is productive, collaborative, and their genuine, authentic selves. I'm honored to have assembled a fierce four of fantastic figures in the LGBTQ+ community. My first panelist, say that fast 5 times. My first panelist is the mind behind Nap Bar in my hometown of Houston and is a certified sleep expert. Nap Bar offers an on-site rest sanctuary to reduce sleep deprivation and increase productivity. She's been featured in a few publications you may have heard of, including Forbes and Essence, and she's an all-around dope human being. Please make welcome Kalia O'Guillory. My second panelist has been recognized for developing top-performing teams and consulting for Fortune 500 companies in the oil and gas, retail energy, telecommunications, and human resources industry. She owns CQ Moore Consulting Group, specializing in leadership facilitation, diversity, equity, inclusion training, and coaching. She's made her mark also in Houston as well. Please make welcome Miriam Lopez. My third panelist is actually a dear friend of mine who in April of 2018 ended his 24-year-plus career with the Walt Disney Company, where he served in a variety of management roles, including proprietor, producer, resource manager, choreographer, and production manager for numerous shows, parades, and special events. Today, he's the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of 26 Health, where their mission is to improve mind, body, spirit health in Central Florida's LGBTQ+ community and ally community. Please make welcome Robert Baker Hargrove. Last but never least is a new friend of mine. He is was a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. Today, he's an inspiration to countless individuals in their pursuit of being their true authentic selves. He's a former coach for the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. He's an NFL mental health advocate, and he's currently training for the 2024 Paralympic Games. He's a very active person in the LGBTQ+ community. Please make welcome Mr. John Edward. Excellent. Panelists, I very much appreciate your time, your expertise, and your wisdom today. Audience, I have a poll question to help give our panel some context about general perception on LGBTQ+. So you'll see on your screen a poll question, very easy, very simple one. Does your organization have an LGBTQ+ policy and strategy? We don't see that on screen yet, but your option should be yes, they do, no, they don't, or I don't know, as we don't talk about it internally. Again, the poll question, does your organization have an LGBTQ+ community policy and strategy? Yes, they do, no, they don't, or I don't know, as we don't talk about that internally. As we're tallying the responses, remember, if you have any questions or comments, please send those into us via the questions pane. I encourage you to connect with us via LinkedIn, We'll give you their social media handles for all the panelists later. Everyone who has registered will also receive a link to an on-demand recording of this session. So if you have any questions or would like some guidance or support in your DE&I strategy or coaching, please let me know. I'd be happy to help. All right, we're coming up with the responses right now. Does your organization have LGBTQ plus policy and strategy? Yes, they do. Percentage-wise, 24%. No, they don't. 68%. That's a pretty shocking, disconcerting, to say the least. And 9%, I don't know, as we don't talk about it internally. So, audience, excuse me, panelists, you have some context to the level of policy and strategy within the audience and their companies and organizations. So let's get into it. Again, audience, if you have questions, comments, please put those into the questions pane. We'll address those along the way. So foundational question, this is open for everyone. As a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community, do you feel like there's been a significant amount of movement in not only embracing your rights, but actually in implementing a real policy to ensure, or at least to cultivate, a sense of equity and belonging free from discrimination? Who wants to start there?
Wow, that's a great question. I think from a level of intensity standpoint, it's an ongoing battle, but you know, when you think about it from the umbrella of diversity, equity, inclusion in general, it's always a battle. And because people are ever changing, people are identifying differently, people have different experiences and life experiences, and when they bring that in, it challenges those who they work for, their employers, to think differently. And so I think it's an ongoing challenge. And do I think that there's been an increased awareness? Absolutely. But I think that there's still so much more to do, as you can see by the poll, with 68% saying they don't have a policy.
Right. What about you, Miriam?
I think that many of the programs that we're seeing sometimes are feels like a check the box or being in compliance rather than a true shift. And what we want to build is a shift that brings our shared humanity to the forefront. We're doing it not because we need to, because it's politically correct or whatever, to change our marketing strategy, but we're doing it because we have a shared humanity. We want to create belonging. We want to create a place where people thrive in being themselves. So I'd like to see us moving in that direction, to having real conversations, to having real change.
You bring up a really good point, Miriam, is that, and Robert too, the 68% who have not really seen a true strategy or policy, really for anything, not just LGBTQ plus awareness or acknowledgement, but just DE&I in general, for a policy to really take hold and to really implement it and see success, it really has to come from the top. So a lot of these things, like you said, Miriam, are perfunctory to check the box, and that really isn't where the success is going to be seen. It has to originate from the top, where there's true belief and true buy-in and true sense of it's the right thing to do, right? So, John, within your world, you know, the NFL and sports and military, what have you seen thus far?
So I'm going to tell you right now, it's a hot topic. You guys know that there was the first transgender female that, you know, won an NCAA competition. So I believe that I mean, it's being talked about. It's trying to be, you know, forward moving. However, I don't think that they're taking the tedious time that it needs in order to actually analyze how they're going to do it. I think it was, you know, a policy was in place, and then it was like, this is what we're going to do. But like Robert said, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of turmoil within the sports of, you know, I mean, we had the first, you know, gay NFL player come out, and, you know, there was a lot of negativity on social media, but then there was also positivity. So I think it's a mixture of things. For me, I'm gonna be honest with you, we don't really talk about it in the Paralympic and Olympic world. You know, my peers, my roommate is Olympian Devin Allen. Everybody knows that I'm gay, but it's not one of these things that you'll go to training and it's actually something that's brought up. So I think it's there, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make it a fair playing ground for everyone.
And we do all have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Having conversations like this. Kalia, what about you and your business ventures and entrepreneurship?
I think just piggybacking off of what everyone else has already said, the 68% was a shock for me. I was like, whoa, right? I mean, I was really, really shocked, taken aback by that. And then the next thought I had is like, okay, who on this call is going to be the trailblazer who's actually going to start the strategy in their said company and organization? Because I wholeheartedly believe that the difference makers are listening into this right now. They just need to hear us tell them to go and meet with your manager, go and meet with the leadership team. You have the ideas. They just need to be brought to the forefront because there's so many other things that are happening right now. And it's on us sometimes to make this a priority. And I think I'm almost certain, I'm confident that we are powerful together, and we all strap on our capes. And there's so many different things that we can make happen just by simply collaborating within the construct of our own organization.
Yes, and to your point, the 46% who are still closeted, I think there's a great amount of percentage of folks within an organization who are advocates and allies, but just are reluctant because of the potential backlash or the pushback they'll get because it is a provocative subject.
Well, Sal, I mean, I can speak to that. I was there. I was one of those people, right? I was a C-level executive at Wells Fargo Bank. I was in the closet because I was in fear that I would be committing career suicide, and I will not be going to the next rung on the ladder if they found out my big secret, right? And I tell you, it took courage, it took bravery, it took for me to have an incredible mentor and an incredible sponsor inside of the organization to really encourage me to be who I am outside of work, at work, on the basketball court, at the gym, everywhere I was. And it was one of the best decisions that I could have ever made. Not only did my productivity increase, I was overseeing a team of 220 plus people, $1 billion book of business. And I went from a mediocre manager to middle of the road to I would now found myself winning sales trips, being flown all over the country because my productivity has gone up, because now I'm not afraid of accidentally saying the wrong pronoun of, oh, hey, what did you and your friend do for the weekend? I'm like, oh, they had to work, or I didn't play that game anymore. It's just like, oh, she and I, we went to the movie. Like, it was just really, really cool. And it was refreshing. And I feel bad in that moment because I wish I would have trusted my team a little bit more, that they loved me and they cared about me, and my leadership skills spoke for that in the way that I took care of them, and not because of who I love. They didn't care. They were just happy that now that I can share another part of myself with them at work. It made a huge difference.
Yes. And we all want to aspire to get to that utopic environment, right, where it doesn't make a difference. And I think I speak on behalf of folks that advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, for folks that are in the community, to give us grace too. We're learning as well what to say, what not to say, what questions are fair to ask. I asked John this week a question on whether this question would be offensive. And so I'm in a learning process too. And so all I ask is also give Gus grace, give advocates and allies and champions grace of learning from you, because we're also in this process together. So in that, Kalia, in thinking about your specific journey to where you are today, you went from Wells Fargo's to the Nap Bar, and then you had to deal with opening up a entrepreneurial venture in the midst of COVID. You experienced a lot of struggle, and throughout that process, what's the one thing that you can identify as an entrepreneur that helped catapult you to that next level of awareness and action? It doesn't necessarily have to be with Nap Bar, but you mentioned with Wells Fargo too, so that business leaders here in the audience can learn what struggles you went through and what did you realize to that point. You kind of made one point where I wish I would have trusted my colleagues a little bit more. What else can you pinpoint that was that next level?
That's such a very solid question, Sal. Thank you so much for asking it. And one of the biggest things that I learned in that day is almost like transferable skills, right? What I learned in that process is that I'm comfortable in my skin. I am who I am, and I refuse to allow and worry about making someone else feel comfortable being in my presence, and it's just because of their lack of or their ignorance. And if I'm not being celebrated in this space, it's not the space for me. And what I learned in corporate America is that I would scratch and claw, and I would try to get to the next rung on the ladder, and I would just kind of give a blind eye to if I was just being tolerated, even though people knew, right? And I come to realize, even through as an entrepreneur, now I get to decide who I do business with. I can give you a short example. here in Houston, right before the pandemic hit, there was a large corporation that NAPBAR was in the process of doing a collaboration with. And they wanted us to come on and build out an unused conference room so that their employees can actually take a nap, right? A really cool concept, helping them with productivity, reduces human error. And I guess the owner of the building or the corporation, he didn't realize that when I showed up as a woman presenting, some would say as masculine, that was a problem for him, and I knew it off the bat. I was with 3 gentlemen who were middle-aged white males, and he refused to acknowledge me. And when he finally acknowledged me, he used the wrong pronoun. And so I gave him grace, and I said, hey, actually, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And at that moment, he just continued to ignore me in the meeting. He asked questions to my counterparts about NAPBAR, despite the fact that my counterparts continued to redirect him back to me and say, hey, actually, Kalia is the owner of NAPBAR. She can answer. And here's something special about this story. Those allies made that meeting for me special. Now, afterwards, they felt sad for me. And I told them don't, because I stood in my power, because I knew in that moment that I didn't care if he offered me $1 million contract. I was not going to do business with someone who would treat me this way, because then I knew he was treating his employees that way. And, that really at the end of the day is the type of stance that we have to take. We can't do business with everyone just because it might make sense for our bank accounts. We have to make sense and do business with people who are going to forward through the policy that's going to be better for humanity. Everybody, not just gays, not just heterosexual, not just blacks, not just white, but everyone, human, period.
Yep. And you that brings up a point in an article I read that you'd said, not all money is good money, right? And so that's a perfect example. And so to your point, I'm gonna skip to another question that I was gonna ask later, but it goes congruent with the example you just gave. In looking at organizations to either work for or partner alongside, what are some key characteristics you're keen to noticing first to determine if it's the right fit for you? So, Clay, you just gave an example. John, you're working with sponsors and people supporting you. How do you say, you're not really the right one because you don't really speak to the essence of me?
So there's a lot of backing to go off of what Kalia said. I think that when I was in service, I wasn't living my true authentic self, and I just was angry, right? So if we look at the progression of my career, everything shot up when I stopped caring about what people thought, and I stopped caring about having a fear that my pro athletic career would diminish because people would know. So what it became is, if you look at the way that everything built up, because my career took off in a year and a half. I retired in 2019, but what it is, Sal, is the industry loves me because I'm not afraid to deny a contract because I don't believe in what they stand for, or when they try to change the narrative and have me say specific things. That's not who I am. When I started this and I started being around these professional athletes and being around the league and being around sponsors and all this other stuff, everyone would tell me, John, stay your way and it'll come your way, So what it was, it'd be like, oh, but we want you more to act like this. That's not who John Edward is. So that's
John, we lost your.
Me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So what it is,
yeah, we can hear you now. We're good.
What it boils down to is, I'm not afraid. Like you just said, not all money is good money. Listen, I'm a foster kid who grew up in the projects. Was hanging around the wrong crowd as a kid. I started with nothing. You're not going to scare me by telling me that I'm not going to get this multi-million-dollar contract. There's going to be someone else that's going to be interested in what I have to bring to the table. It's the same aspect of what I have to say. I'm not disrespectful in any manner, but I will tell you how I feel, right? And I'm going to tell you if you cross some sort of line. And if you don't want to do business with me, we're not meant to vibe. And that's fine. On to the next person. So I think for me, contract-wise, if you don't believe in, my core values and who I am as a person, I'm not going to sign with you. And I'm not afraid to. Right now, I'm battling a Paralympic career, right, on solely fundraisers and figuring it out, right? Because there's a lot of people that are intimidated by the way that I present that.
And that takes a lot of conviction and integrity. I always say that it'll follow you long after your job or whatever partnership you might have. It'll follow you personally. I'm interested in Robert and Miriam, what your perspectives are on this. Miriam, you know, in consulting companies, I'll give you an example. Late 2020, NASDAQ came out with an announcement that people that are, or companies that are listed, had to show some semblance of evidence of a DE&I strategy. And I don't know what the ramifications were if they weren't providing that, but that shows, or is an example of companies being very intentional about DE&I strategy. So when you're consulting folks, do you touch upon that? And also when you're identifying companies to consult for, are you looking at that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from everybody here, there's two dimensions. There is us anchoring on our values and who authentically we are and fully showing up. And that you get to decide as a human being. What are your values? How do you want to show up? Do you want to be authentic? Do you want to stand up as your full self? And then there's the other dimension of the companies, the organizations that we sponsor, that we work for. Are they showing up in a way that is inclusive? And if they're not, what do they need to do about it? You know, so three things that I think that companies must do in order to promote an LGBTQ plus friendly culture. The first one is we need to ask to promote psychological safety and belonging. And that is being able to show up as ourselves fully without fear of any negative consequences, self-image, status, career. It's a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, that we are able to be vulnerable, right? So in psychological safety teams feel accepted and respected. And when Google set out to do a research of, you know, what does it take to really have a team that is the best team? Is it IQ? Is it job tenure? What is it? And the number one thing they found is psychological safety. So I think that is critical to embed in the culture. Number two, as a company, is ensure your policies, from the talent attraction strategy to the onboarding, really mirror your values of support and advocacy for the LGBTQ plus community. Is it language inclusive? Are the pronouns and name usage in there? Like if we were to take a camera and walk around the building, you know, would people be able to observe that it is a culture of belonging and that advocates for the LGBTQ plus community? And the third thing is, I would say, invest in promoting, training, and educating on diversity and inclusive leadership. I mean, there's so many great organizations such as this one. That's my day-to-day of the work, is going out there to different organizations and teaching on inclusive leadership in a way that is tactical, in a way that companies can connect with their employees, define their own blueprint, define their core values, and embed that into the culture. So I know from my own personal experience and from what I hear everybody here sharing is when people feel safe to be authentic, we connect with ourselves and with others in a way that unleashes the best of us. And when we show up like that, it's contagious. So we need more of that. We need to speak up, and we need to make a request for what we need, and we need to really ask for companies to take a stand for creating an inclusive and diverse work environment and culture.
And you said something at the beginning, the sense of safety, and I always harken back to the fact that it does impact people's mental well-being, and depression, anxiety, all of those things impact the way people operate within the organizations, not just from a functional perspective, but also as a person. And so I think companies need to be more empathetic and be aware of that carries them home, that carries into their personal lives. And you know, we can go deeper into that, a whole nother session, but just doing the right thing and making sure that you said that they are inclusive, there's a sense of belonging, and that they're intentional about actually coaching and teaching and guiding a company amongst DE&I. Robert, what are your thoughts on that? And when you're partnering with folks, and I know that within your company, and especially in the Central Florida community, you're very big there. So what are things, and you came from a company, a large company that, you know, is arguably, well, let's stay away from that topic from a news perspective. I just remembered that. But when you're looking at that, with your own 26 Health, what are things that you're looking for?
So I can tell you, I think what's really interesting in the timing of this actual panel is because it's National LGBTQ plus Health Awareness Week. And, you know, when Miriam was talking about having a sense of psychological safety, That's truly important because it ties directly to what Kalia was saying is productivity. So creating a safe environment creates a productive environment. And that's what's really important. And so one of the things that we as a company, 26 Health, and I advocate for others to do is we just ask the question, hey, what's your diversity, equity, inclusion policy? And what is your policy in regards to LGBTQ plus community? And if they can't show it to us or they can't write it to us, then we move on. We don't do business with them. And as a result, as a community, we've done over $3 million in 1 year in just small businesses, small LGBT-owned local smaller businesses, instead of going to larger corporations because those corporations don't have a policy. And so it's don't estimate the power of the pink dollar is what I'm saying. And so there's a lot of power in unity and a lot of power in being able to create that sense of strength and understanding. And when you put those beliefs behind the dollar, those two things combined really then give you another level of power and sense of stability. Because as an organization, you want to be able to stand firm in who you are in your culture, but then able to then support that whatever your product services are.
Yes. Now, a question just came in, which is a great question from a business perspective and an organizational perspective. What is the role, pros and cons, of affinity groups or employee resource groups, as otherwise known, ERGs, specific to LGBTQ+, just like there's Black ERG or Asian ERG? What are the pros and cons of having one?
I'll jump in on that, and then I'll let Kalia jump in. I think there are pros to having them, but I think the con is that if the leadership is not listening, if you're going to gather people for their level of expertise and their experiences, and you're asking them to bring their full selves to the table, and then they're sharing that, saying, "Hey, this is how it's going to impact our company, or this is going to impact our productivity," and you are not listening, then they become useless. Then they become just figureheads, and not only is it detrimental to the company, but then it's detrimental to those employees who are participating and giving of themselves and their time. So
it's almost as if it's even more detrimental having one if there's no action taken from what the results are of the employee resource group. They raise awareness and then nothing happens. That's even worse, right? It's almost like it's perfunctory. They just did it just because it looks good. So
the lack of action is what can be more detrimental than not doing it at all.
Absolutely. Kalia?
Yeah, and just segueing off of Robert, I founded the Wachovia Bank Diversity Board, and I think the reason why it was successful is because we had the buy-in, right? It came from the top down. They attended meetings. We got the funding. Keyword, funding. Because so many times I also have a coaching business where this is the work that I do in a DEI space, and oftentimes people will call me up and they want to create an infinity group. They want to do all these things, but then they have $1,000 budget for the year. How is that even possible? How are you communicating to your team that this is important in your corporate social responsibilities report, but yet you only allocated $1,000 for it? It can't be that important. So I think you really truly have to make sure that the money matches what your mouth is saying, and also what's written in reporting. And I also subscribe to the ideology that these groups are also designed for belonging, as Miriam has shared with us. But I think also to some type of small con is because it is segregated. So, some of my coaching is that why don't we just have a one-stop shop, a cool affinity group where everyone is involved. We don't have just one for Blacks, one just for women, one just for LGBTQ, one for whatever. We have one affinity group and everyone belongs to this group, and we might have little groups in the midst of it, little umbrella groups, subsidiaries in the midst of that. But at the end of the day, it's one group because we're all one human. So I think my work that I'm doing now is trying to evolve what that looks like, and in terms of having it as collective versus a segregated look through the lens.
That's a great point. And it's a question that comes up quite often on these roundtables regarding employee resource groups. The questions always are our employee resource groups inadvertently creating more segregation because you have a Black one, you have Asian, you have Hispanic, you have LGBTQ plus. And I think your idea is great. And also, if you continue to have those separate ones, make sure that you invite everyone. So within the LGBTQ hrG, invite everyone to attend. That way, those folks can learn and feel more comfortable and acknowledge and seek guidance, ask questions within those groups. That's one of the best practices that my previous panelists who have been chief diversity officers for Nike, Walmart, PepsiCo, 7-Eleven, NBA, MLB, they all said the same thing. The common denominator is to invite everyone so they are inclusive in those separate hrG groups if that's the course you want to take. So thank you very much for that insight. You know, Robert, you and I talked a few months ago about the approach that we both take, or what you'd like to take. And this is from a perspective of cultivating an LGBTQ plus friendly community first. And this will eventually influence what's happening within companies and organizations in that community. So to be clear, this is not about pushing folks to an LGBTQ plus lifestyle, right? It's rather to better educate them on how to coexist more positively. So what's the best way in doing that within a community that eventually will inspire change within companies in that community? You took that approach very differently, where I said, what should organizations do? You're like, Sal, back it up. Maybe we should start with the community first, because that will bleed over into organizations in the community.
Absolutely, because organizations stem from your community. And so once you back it up and you think about who, you know, where is my company? Where are we from? This is the community, wherever you are, this is the community we're in, this is the community we're serving. And if you're not part of that community, then you're not going to be enriching your employees, because your employees inevitably will live where you work, where they work. And, you know, and so we have a really strong strategy in regards to, we must mirror the community that we are serving. And I say, we always hire the unicorn. So I say, look at your staff, who's missing, what's missing, you know, all things being equal, you know, what can someone else bring to the table that we're not hearing about, that we're missing, that we're not speaking on? And that's the unicorn that we're looking for. And we will go several months without hiring someone, not even posting the position, until we find potential unicorns. And being part of various business chambers really broadens that perspective in regards to reaching out, looking at resource pools, you know, and that's the challenge. And that's what I would say you need to do to be part of your community, number one. Number two, reach out to the various business chambers. And three, hire the unicorn. Always hire the unicorn, but create that sense of psychological safety that Miriam, because that is just ultimately, that goes back to productivity. They're tied, one and the same. You create that sense of safety, you're going to create a great sense of productivity for that work environment.
Excellent. Miriam, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think I love that, Robert, that you're looking for the unicorns. And once the organizations onboard the unicorns, right? So there's diversity there, diversity in thought, diversity in gender and race, et cetera, is their inclusivity, right? Because you can have a diverse team, but not be inclusive. Or you can have an inclusive team, but not be diverse. So I want to make sure we highlight the importance of both things, that you find the unicorns and you actually include them, bring them to the table, empower them to use their superpowers. That's how you maximize both of those ingredients together.
Yeah, and also tying into having those conversations. One of the unique things that we do is we have here, we call it Culture Club, and we split our team into various teams, and we just talk about events that are happening within the community and what's the impact on our employees. We let them tell us what the impact is, because if there are things that we can do as a company to make them feel more secure and more comfortable, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace, then they're going to feel even that much more connected to the company, feel that much more safe, and have that much higher productivity. So, you know, like Miriam, you're right on target there when you're talking about being able to have those conversations, because shared word is really about learning, and that's how people continue to learn and break down those barriers.
Thank you for that. John, you and I, you have such a unique and inspiring story as a former staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. you've shared with me and in your stories that you've put out there on multiple podcasts, the challenges you faced when you were unexpectedly outed. And not to oversimplify that journey for you, but what do you suggest organizations do to eliminate that discrimination? And how would you have liked senior officers? And when I say senior officers, this can be analogous to executive leadership team or management teams within companies. What would you like to see them do to better support you?
I think that's a good question, because I think, Sal, that's honestly what's been that's what was the issue. I think it's fear, the fear of the unknown, right? So a lot of individuals didn't know how to act or how to speak or how to ask questions. So instead of asking and trying to get to know me, they went along with the crowd and spoke the rumors and said all the negative connotations about me. So for me, it's very hard. It was very hard coming to the Naval Academy and instructing leadership and trying to create the best officer for Navy and Marines while having a very bad toxic taste in my mouth from officers and senior leadership. But I think one of the things that I learned here with all my kids was ask questions. If you have some sort of doubt or something, ask a question. Yeah, you could offend someone or you couldn't, but I would rather educate someone on a certain circumstance. So for me, a backstory, I was outed on social media back in 2013. That wasn't a common thing. Nobody was ready for a gay Marine, especially in ground side. I was, in the most alpha job you can do in the military. And instead of individuals asking about the situation, I came into work the following day and everybody was just reposting and passing along what was said about me on social media. So I think essentially no one ever asked, right? So when I came here, people have like, oh, who's your mentor? Like, who did you look up to? And I kept sitting in these meetings and these classes and these, orientations with senior officers here at the Naval Academy. And they'd be like, oh, did you ever have an officer you looked up to? No, I did not. Did you ever have an enlisted you looked up to? No, I did not, because nobody took the time to get to know me. Nobody took the time to really figure out how I was doing. It wouldn't have been until, if I would have committed suicide, that's when everybody would have been like, oh, wow, I wish I would have known, So I think that communication is key, and we say it, right? Communication is important in a relationship, in a friendship, in a workplace, and whatever you're doing. So it's the same concept of leadership. Ask the questions, and they'll correct you or they'll educate you on the certain situation, because that's not what it went. It was never like that for me for 11 years, and even now, right, as a coach, or even as in the athletic industry, I appreciate. Sal texted me like, hey, this is. How do you take this, right? And I answer in how John takes it, but I always emphasize like, hey, Rob might take that a different way. So you should ask him how he views this, because there's a lot of things, that I just view in a whole different manner.
Yes. And you're always very candid about your answers, and you're always you're suggesting, hey, ask other people to get their perspective as well. So that's, I think, very important for leaders, just to, as John said, get to know them, as simple and innocuous as that sounds, just to better understand, and also to empathize. And again, I keep coming back to psychological safety, because that's an important thing for me. And some of the other things that I do is making sure that mental wellness and mental well-being is also taken into consideration within this topic. Another good question came in, so I'll ask the panel here. Any advice, for instance, lessons learned to prevent this topic from being just the event focused to celebrate during a certain month or a week, and really develop this into the fabric of the organization? And as my previous panelist and friend, Nichelle Grant, she's Chief DE&I Officer at Siemens, she made the comment, this is not a moment, but a movement. And I think that kind of encapsulates that question is, what do you do to make sure that this isn't just the fad of the month? There are several things that we celebrate throughout the year, and really make this so that it is a strategic initiative and really part of an overall people strategy within a company. Kalia, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it made me chuckle a little bit, because I just lived that last month for Black History Month, right? Like I am, my phone is blowing off the hook for February for Black History Month. Oh, we need a speaker, or we need somebody, and then same thing in May and June and July for Pride, and now my pushback is, okay, well, let's put me on retainer so we can build out your 12-month plan, I could come and speak to you for this particular event, but we need to do something that's ongoing because you don't have anything else that's going on. And so for me, it's not being afraid to really to push the envelope. What else are you willing to do? And if this is just what they're looking to do to check the boxes, then I tell people up front, I'm not your girl. I can refer you to some other dope humans that I know who will gladly be able to support your program, your initiative. But I'm looking for a long-term type of contribution that I will attach my legacy to, because I don't want to attach my legacy to something that's just going to be for a check mark or a tick box.
Yep. Miriam, what about you as you're consulting? How do you really weave this into what it shouldn't be? And it's kind of another example is how chief diversity officers are now the big thing to hire. A lot of companies are doing it because they didn't have one before. And a lot of bigger companies, the Nikes, the Walmarts, the PepsiCos, that was already woven into the strategic infrastructure. So how do you make sure that that this isn't just an initiative, that this really truly is part of the strategy?
Yeah, I think the question to ask is for the companies and for the individuals is, how do I want to show up to the world? Who do I need to be? And that comes with a C word, which is choice. And then another C word that follows that is commitment. What am I committed to? Am I committed to just celebrating this month, or creating a movement within the organization from a place of change that is really deep and transformative? And at the core of it, because we're humans, and guess what? Yes, we all need shelter, we all need food, we need water, but we need to belong. We need to belong to ourselves, and we need to belong to each other and to our communities and our companies. So this is kind of like a life and death critical thing, all right? Because we can be surviving, but are we fully thriving within our communities? That is a sense of urgency. I know for many years, I lived in the closet, and I was the opposite of psychological safety. I was in fear. I was disconnected from within, and no matter how much I achieved, there was just a sense of loneliness and disconnection that really there were days where, like, should I live one more day? To John's point, right? We see the suicide rates going up. So we need to connect all the dots and really make a decision of who do we need to be as organizations, who do we need to be as humans, what are we committed to, and are we willing to invest our money and our time and our resources and our effort in creating that change. And if we're not that, then just say that, say that and be authentic and be real to the world, because then we at least know where we stand. And then once we know where we stand, then we can look at the landscape and see what work we need to do together.
Now you're a consultant in some very traditional male-dominated, perceived to be not so progressive industries. I mean, that's probably safe to say, right?
And you know what I do? The greatest gift is when I go to the oil and gas companies or whatever, and I show up as my full self. And I can initially see like, oh, okay, but then once I start, what I do is I'm human. Yep. So I choose how I show up. And when there are classes that I'm doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's not landing, then I'll share my own story to humanize it even more. And I'll share with them, how there were days where I didn't want to live anymore, how I felt so disconnected. And when I do that and bring the emotion into it and humanize it, then they connect the dots. And they probably have a daughter, an uncle, somebody, that has the same journey. And at the end of the day, how do you want to show up with that person in your life? So the best gift we can give to each other is to show up as our authentic self, be bold, be courageous, be vulnerable.
I think to your point, really, if you distill it to the human, emotional, psychological elements, most people will, that's the aha moment of, wow, that really, now I understand. So the question I was going to ask you kind of mirrors the question that just came in from the audience. How do you reach out to LGBTQ plus communities to let them know you are a safe place without making them feel singled out or uncomfortable? You're not putting a spotlight on them, but you're also giving them that feeling of psychological, even physical safety in some instances, right? So how do you do that tactfully and strategically and emotionally? How do you touch upon those people?
Well, I think one way is going back to business chambers, because when you're so many communities, their connection point, their touch points their touchstones are their businesses that are within the communities. So that's one way. The other, and thinking way outside the box, is if you're a CEO or you're in a C-suite, reach out to another C-suite person who is opposite of you, who is not a representative of who you are, and have them come in and talk to you. Be open, be vulnerable to have a discussion about where you may be lacking in your company. And because it's great, we can't put it as a bottom up. This can't be just a top down. This has got to be from both directions. And you have to be vulnerable. And when we were talking about creating a sense of psychological safety, let's be clear, it can't just be for those who may identify as LGBTQ+. It has to be psychological safety for our heterosexual partners as well. Yep. And you know what? I'm part of the community and I still make mistakes. We have to give each other grace. We have to provide the grace to others that we would expect for them to provide to us. And when you are an executive leader, when you are a leader and you really want to make change, you have to find those who are open to helping you make that change, but you have to be vulnerable and willing to make that change and support that change.
Great point. And to your point, Robert, I realize that it's not just the responsibility of the LGBTQ plus community, and that it's incumbent upon everyone. You just mentioned that it's upon everyone to make an effort, to be intentional about it. I think we're all realistic in acknowledging that not everyone understands or is comfortable with someone in the LGBTQ plus community. Sadly, that's just reality. That said, what's a common misperception that you can demystify so as to help your colleagues and your community members understand the desire just to feel like you belong? What are some misperceptions you're like, got that all wrong? John?
So I think, and it's education, right, and giving people grace. When I meet individuals, people make these jokes. They'll be like, oh, The Bachelor's on or something, and they'll be like, do you like want to watch it or something? That I'm an athlete. I would rather go to the gym and do stuff like that. So I think you got to really understand a person, and it just goes back to getting to know someone, because not everybody does the same things, right? In the athletic world, I remember within the last 4 years, like people wouldn't believe that I was gay. The people would be like, "Are you joking?" And I'm like, who jokes about this? I just think it's really getting to know someone, and don't assume that because a friend of yours or a relative does a certain something that everyone's the same. I think it just goes back to getting to know every single person, because I can tell you right now, looking at the panel, there's a lot of different things that we all probably do, and you just can't assume. I'd rather just get to know you and be like, all right, what is it that you like to do? What are your things that you don't like people to say, or whatever the case may be, and then that's how you build a strong foundation of a friendship and a relationship.
Yep. Anyone else?
I could just jump in on that, because John made me chuckle because I often get the, oh my God, I have my sister's best friend, she's gay, or oh my God, I have an uncle who lives in Missouri. It's always a story behind it. I don't need the story. You could just share your truth with me and say, hey, I was wondering about this. You just posted this and there was a girl, how does this work? If you're inquisitive, I love that even more. I welcome it, because I would rather you share your truth with me and I can give you my truth back, versus you thinking you know something based on, to John's point, by someone else that or something you saw on TV, even worse. So I think the biggest way for us to work together as a team is just for us to be comfortable sharing our truth. And if you have a question, ask it. I love it when someone will say, hey, I have a question to ask. I'm not sure. And I always say, well, just ask. I know it's coming from a place of there's no malice coming from the place where you're coming from. So let's talk through it. And then normally I'm laughing to tears, because it's just so crazy and funny. But it goes back to being human, and it goes back to just creating that connection between another human being. I always often tell people take away my blackness, take away that I'm a woman, take away that I belong to the LGBTQ plus community. Just take that away and just have a conversation with me.
Give grace.
I think it's normalizing. I think it's normalizing, right? Because I'll tell you, for me, like, I remember this one time I was talking to someone, and without hesitation, they were like, "So do you have a husband, wife?" But there was no it was just husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and I was like, because I was like, have they heard of me? Do they know my story? You know? And she was like, "No, it's 2020. Like, I'm just trying to figure out like what side of the spectrum you stand." And I think that that's also a subliminal thing to go off of, like, companies, right? Like, if you show up to work, or like to an interview, and someone asks you that and you're part of the community, you're like, oh, there's no, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of hesitation when people are like, "So are you," right? And that kind of makes you feel weird. Like, just ask it and make it normal, right? Because a lot of comments that were said when Carl came out, he played for the Raiders, everyone was like, okay. Because it should be, right? Like, it shouldn't be like gay NFL player. Well, okay, NFL player happens to be gay. So to go off what Kalia said.
That's where we hope and aspire to get to, right? A good question that came in, and I'll read it as is. Any websites, podcasts, publications you recommend to follow? And yes, please feel free to self-promote. So,
are we all gonna fight?
Anything that you suggest the audience to listen to, and to what inspires you, what gives you the strength and the grace to go ahead and try it?
I mean, okay, all right. So I'll jump in. I'll self-promote. Please feel free to follow 26 Health, either on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. But I think what's really important is to not let fear and the fear of the unknown, the fear of change, be the thing that holds you back. So whenever you're looking for something that you think, oh, you know what, that's interesting, that's a little different, or that's where an area I'm lacking in, learn about it, be open to it, follow them, read a book on it, because that constant learning is what will support you and help you continue to build that foundation on which you are standing.
And then I'll jump out. For me, I've published some of my videos that I've done with clients who've given, because they understand the work, right? They're not, well, we want to keep this internal, but they get that we need this for the whole world to see. So I have on my YouTube channel, my handle is KOG Speaks TV. And there I have some really authentic videos with NASA, as well as when I did some work with LinkedIn. Those are the top two that pop up off the top of my head, that if you watch those, I think that they will help connect some dots from an employee, also from someone who's owning their own business, and how do you navigate and operate, even from corporate speak. And then a book by Miguel Ruiz, the 4 Agreements. I think that helps us get grounded. Yeah, my guys are like, yes, let's do it. That and The Alchemist. I read that. I listen to that book probably every other year with a new fresh lens on, because it helps me with my mental health. It helps me with groundwork. It helps me just recommit to who I am. I know who I am, but there's moments where I need just a reminder to recommit to who I am, so I can make sure I'm navigating in the world in a way that I will be proud about and proud to be attached to my legacy.
An audience, if you're not writing this fast enough, I'll get the panel to send me what they just mentioned, and I'll send it out to everyone, so you'll have a list of all these things that they're talking about. John, you had something to say?
Yeah, so for me, I have 2 specific podcasts that I did, and the way that the interviews went, one of them was specifically what really happened in the Marine Corps, and that's The Examined Athlete is the name of the podcast, with Clay Rottenbach. And it's just pretty much opening the eyes of what I truly went through as a Marine Corps Staff Sergeant. And then the second one was the Jimmy Rex Show out of Utah. He's a huge LGBT plus advocate. And it was more of what do you want to tell the teenagers and the kids that are currently going through this and, trying to make it to where you're at? Because for me, it started as a winning a gold medal But then I realized, I needed to let go of fear. And 4 agreements, Kalia, actually helped me with my journey, because there was just a lot of pent up anger that I had from my time in service. Once I let it go and I started getting into the groundwork of, energy and vibes and my mental health, it was when I stepped back and I realized, listen, I'm not doing this for the adults. I'm doing this because there's kids that are out there that are probably struggling with this, and mental health is a huge thing that we all, are allies with. But I think the strongest thing for me has been, I need these kids to understand you could be a teenage football player and still be gay. We're talking about ending stigmas. We're talking about misconceptions, right? I understand I'm a 235-pound Olympic weightlifter, but that doesn't mean that discontinues who I am as a person and my true identity. So I think that those are things that, just anything that helps you live your true internal and mental self, that's gonna play a major role in helping.
Excellent. Miriam, you have any books? Or
Sure.
anything?
I will say to you, if you don't know where to start somewhere. Reach out to this wonderful organization, reach out to any of us. You can find me on LinkedIn. I work with companies to identify their patterns. What are the conversations they're having right now? What do they stand for, and what new patterns they want to create? And we infuse DEIB into the culture, and we have accelerated transformation. I follow great teachers like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. I'm a lifelong student, and God knows I had to go to therapy since coming out to all my family. I'm the youngest of 5 in a very traditional Hispanic family. So being able to reach out to all the resources, and finally the LGBTQ plus chamber in your area, I think that's a great resource as well, Sal.
That's a great point.
There's
For me
one book
personally,
I would like to add one book, and another one would be 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership.
15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership.
Yes, because it challenges you to always think, are you operating above or below the line?
That's a good one. Good one. Thank you for all those recommendations, and thank you for the person who asked that. For me personally, I would have hoped that we wouldn't have to need to facilitate a session like today. Like to John's point, we hope to get to normalize all these things. And the very essence of equality should include everyone all the time. And the irony is that all of these differences that we've talked about collectively make us uniquely similar. And we all aspire to be respected, acknowledged, included, and loved. And I think what the panelists have expressed and conveyed today covers and encapsulates all that. We're about 3 minutes out, but I wanted to make sure that I give everyone here the opportunity. Does anyone have anything exciting you'd like to share with the audience that you're working on? I'll start off Brady Bunch style. Miriam.
Yes, so we are working on incorporating for small business like a kit to really infuse DEIB and make it in a way that makes sense and infuses it into the culture, policies, etc. So that is to come the fall of this year.
Perfect. What about you, John? We've heard about you training. Tell us more about.
So please check out my mini docuseries that just came out on YouTube. It's Who is Carbon Fiber? Road to Paralympics. And I'm also raising funds. So if you can direct my GoFundMe to individuals and speak about it, it's Road to Paralympics. Just giving a journey on the struggles of trying to win gold.
And don't forget us when you do win gold. We remember John Wynn. I'll pull this out so to remind you. Mr. Hargrove?
Yeah, I would just say that we're 26 Health is always here to help people. And if you're ever looking for, some speakers or someone to come in and really just talk about, how do we make a change and implement that change to be so much more inclusive, particularly for the wellness and health of your staff and your employees and your culture, your company culture. That's really important. So feel free to reach out to me at any point in time.
Absolutely. Kalia.
Piggyback off of Robert, we just popped up, NatBar just popped up. We rolled out our virtual reality rest therapy, and we just popped up and debuted it at South by Southwest Music and Film Festival in Austin. It was bananas. And so we are looking to partner up with corporations who really truly are ready to put rest in culture, rest in wellness, and really allow their employees to be productive and reduce human error, all while improving their bottom line. It's really, really cool. So we're excited about that. If anyone wants to reach out, they can reach me on LinkedIn or my handle on Instagram. That's at KOG Speaks. That's also for any DEI needs, and NAPBAR is at NAPBAR HOU.
Excellent. And I'm actually going to take a nap after this, so it's inspired
me too.
I wish I have another call.
Yeah. So today we've talked about one of the most provocative and thought-provoking topics that organizations and the general public have wrestled with for a long time. As you distill the talking points you've heard today, I challenge each of you to evaluate your current position on this topic with a little bit more empathy and compassion. It's not about endorsing a certain lifestyle. It's about affording everyone around you the same level of dignity and respect that each of us innately deserves. This acknowledgement will undeniably lead to better collaboration, better talent attraction, a more unified workforce and culture, and a renewed sense of belonging amongst your organization. On behalf of hrQ, Landrum HR, and the audience, Miriam, Robert, Clea, John, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Audience, please take a moment to take a quick poll and answer the survey as you exit the webinar. It helps me out in identifying new topics, new formats, etc. Be on the lookout for future sessions of my Ideal Roundtable series throughout the rest of the year. For hrQ and Landrum HR, I'm Sal Vergara. Until next time, elevate yourself and those around you. Y'all have a good afternoon. Thanks again for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.